When the Lord stirred the heart of a foreign king and brought his people back from exile, a remnant gathered again in Jerusalem with a unified purpose. Jeshua, with his brothers, the priests, and Zerubbabel with his family, rose up and rebuilt the altar of the God of Israel. They wanted to offer burnt offerings upon it, as it was written in the teaching of Moses. Fearing how some of the surrounding people might react, they set the altar firmly on its original foundation. They began to sacrifice burnt offerings to the Lord on the altar every morning and every evening, offering regular offerings, freewill offerings, and celebrating the holy festivals of the Lord. And all this happened before they had even started to lay the foundation of the temple. So then, since we have a great high priest who has entered heaven, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold firmly to what we believe. This high priest of ours understands our weaknesses, for he has faced all of the same testings we do. Yet he did not sin. So let us come boldly to the throne of our gracious God. There we will receive his mercy, and we will find grace to help us when we need it the most. The word of the Lord.
Well, we've come through 8 or 10 weeks of Revelation. Are you okay? We're going to change this morning, if that's okay with you. We listened last week while Ethan brought it home in beautiful fashion. We were gone all weekend, traveling down I-69 while Lori held up the phone, and we watched the service, prayed with Jason, Kendall, Martin, while Lori had her eyes closed. I was driving, and followed the prompts, and then listened while Ethan landed that entire series on Revelation. And I just feel this morning like we're going to go in another direction. Is that all right? And I want to stay as much as I can out of the way. We will close the service today and every week for the next 6 weeks by coming to the altar in communion, participating. And it just seems to me that this is something we would learn better by doing than by talking about it, but so that we can do it with some kind of understanding. Let me try to frame that in. I'll get right to the core of it. Where is the place peculiar to every other space in your life where you go to meet with God? I'll say it again. Where is the space peculiar to every other space in your life where you go to meet with God? What happens there? What do you do in that space? How does that space affect the other parts of your life? How does it integrate them? How does it energize them? What if you were to be more intentional about that space? First, in forming one, then in doing in that space many of the things that we do in this one. How might that affect the rest of your life? I believe that every person is incurably religious, inveterate worshipers. The threat in the Bible is never that you would become a pagan worshiping nothing. It is always that you would become an idolater, worshiping everything. And the threat is that what you worship, you ultimately become. So what you have become today, now, might be evidence of the thing that you worship. Now, if I'm right, what this means is that there is at the core of every personality an indestructible altar. Sometimes that altar is abandoned, completely forsaken. Other times it's defiled. The wrong things are on it. Other times it's broken down from the damage and the hurt in someone's life. Once in a while, that altar is hot and it's active. But if you think of every human being, including yourself, as having at the core of your personality an altar, then that means someone is always in front of it. Something is always on it. And something or someone else is always over it. Whatever is over it is the thing we want more than anything else in this world. Whatever is on it is the thing we sacrifice in exchange for getting the things we want in this world. And of course, we ourselves are always in front of it. Are you with me so far? So I want to spend time during Lent looking at some of these altars. I mean the ones that are in the Bible and the ones that are in our lives. And particularly what I want to focus on is what the function of that altar is. Believe it or not, most of the altars in the Bible don't involve a sacrifice. Many of the altars in the Bible are not even Hebrew or Christian altars at all. They're altars to other gods. But I want to focus on what happens at altars. And the reason is because for Christians, the cross is a kind of altar. Does that make sense? It is the place where God and humanity meet. It's the place where the very best of God and the very worst of humans come together. Where all of God's promises and all that is wrong with this world intersect. They intersect at an altar and they intersect at a cross. Now, frequently, when I talk to Christians in the evangelical tradition, we have moved, believe it or not, right past the altar and onto the cross. As though the cross of Christ has done everything for us, we need not bother with the altar. But what if the altar points us to the cross? What if the cross doesn't replace the altar? What if the cross personifies the altar by bringing it to the form of a single person? So what if you can't really understand the cross until you understand what is happening in the altar? Are you still there? Traditionally, altars were a place in any religion where God and humans met. There are simple rules that govern this exchange in the other religions. The first rule is that God or the gods are different. They are separate. They are transcendent. They are far off. They are unseen, unpredictable, mostly unknown, and yet they govern things in this world. Rule number 2 is that even though they are far off, they have a lot to do with our lives, our destiny. They control the weather. They control fertility. They control the rise to power. They control victory or defeat in battle. This is why in ancient civilizations, public officials were not only present in religious ceremonies, they led them because they believed that a city could not truly flourish apart from the favor of the gods. Were they wrong? So now most of our life depends on what these gods decide, and yet these gods are unpredictable and mostly unknown. Which leads to rule number 3. The way to get favor with these gods is to form an altar. And on that altar, sacrifice anything, everything that we imagine the gods could want. Because if for a moment we can get their attention, they might favor us. Our luck might change. Now stop for a moment and consider that what I'm describing right now is not only foreign worship, foreign gods. I am in fact describing the kind of God that many Christians pray to every day of their lives. What I'm saying is that many Christians, I think, by the image of God that they have formed in their mind, in fact, worship a foreign God at a Christian altar. Let that soak in for a moment. Because what happens in the Christian story is fundamentally different. And it can be summed up in a single word. And that word is covenant. A covenant is an agreement that changes the relationship between two people by obligating each to the other in ways determined by the terms of the covenant. Are you with me? A covenant is an arrangement between two people that changes the relationship between them, obligating each one to the other in terms defined by the covenant. So what is completely different in the Judeo-Christian religion is that God acts first. We are not approaching the altar hoping to get favor from a God who is mostly unknown. In our religion, church, God has come down and revealed himself to us. And where he reveals himself, there we build an altar. Take Abraham, for instance, the godfather of our religion. He is moving to a land he does not know where. Partway through the journey, God interrupts him. So far as we know, Abraham is not looking for God. He's not looking for a purpose in his life. God interrupts him and makes an outrageous promise that only a God could make. He says, I will bless you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless the earth through you. I will give you this land. And here stands a nomad who owns nothing, being told by a voice he can't ignore that power is going to give him this land. Abraham promptly turns around, and there he builds an altar. It says, in the place where God appeared to him. Abraham has a son named Isaac. Isaac, same story. Minding his business, one day that voice comes to Isaac and says, I am the God of your father. I will be with you. I will bless you. And I will bless all nations of the earth through you. Isaac promptly turns around and builds an altar in the words of Genesis 26, and there he calls on the name of the Lord. Jacob is sound asleep one night when all of a sudden he has a vision. There is a staircase going into the heavens. He looks, and Yahweh himself is standing alongside the staircase with angels ascending and descending on the staircase. Jacob is flabbergasted with this vision. Before he can collect himself, the one standing next to the staircase says to him, I am the God of your fathers. I will bless you. I will bless the earth through you. I will give you the very land you are standing on. Jacob wakes up, collects himself, and says the most profound thing. Surely God was in this place, and I didn't know it. God can be in a place and you don't know it. He says this place is none other than the house of God, Bet El. It's the gateway to heaven. He takes the stone he was laying on, sets it down, pours oil over the top of the stone, and then he wanders off. 7 chapters, 2 wives, and 12 children later, Yahweh appears to Jacob again and says, you remember that place where I met you? Remember you called it house of God, gateway to heaven. Yes, you were right about that place. Go back there and build an altar. So Jacob returns to the place where God appeared to him, and there he builds his altar. Are you there? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, David, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Malachi, all of them built altars. The one that rattles me, and you'll see why, is the one in Ezra. When the people of God returned from exile, only 50,000 of them. They've been in captivity so long, they've lost their identity. They forgot who they are. And they've lost their imagination. They can't even dream like a free person anymore. Cyrus, the king of Persia, has told them, go back and build the temple. And we all know, because Cyrus is who Cyrus is, he wanted that temple built in his name. So the children of Israel go back to their homeland, and they gather as one person in the square to start the temple, only they don't build it. Jeshua and Zerubbabel, the two priests, together with a handful of others, come together in the center of the community, and there they build an altar. I thought there was an emergency for a second. I was checking my pulse. I thought you looked okay. They built the altar 7 months before they started building the church. Let me say that in slow motion. They built the altar 7 months, and they worshiped on it twice a day, once in the morning and once in the early evening, for 7 months before they laid the first stone on the temple. Today in America, we build churches and then add an altar. These people built an altar and then added a church. Why on earth would you build the altar first when you don't even have a place to put it? And the answer is very, very simple. Because from the beginning of time, it was the altar that sanctified the temple. It was never the temple that sanctified the altar. Let me say that in slow motion. A building or a house is sacred not because of the functions that happen there. They are sacred because of the furniture in the room. They are made sacred by the altar. Therefore, whenever something was done in front of an altar, it was said to be sacred. Sacred, the Latin term, simply means to consecrate, to make holy. What happens in front of the altar is made holy. And what happens away from the altar was said to be profanus. Away from the altar, profane. Think now about the place of the altar in the American church, and you can start to feel the angst that was in me when I read Ezra. If the altar is even present in most American evangelical churches now, it is relegated to some position far in back, out of sight. Why, you can come and go and worship every week and never notice it. In cases where it is removed from the room, how is the worship done in that room sacred if never done in front of an altar? You say, well, we have Jesus. Yes, altar personified Jesus. I'm not suggesting you choose. I'm suggesting we have both. Still there? What is the difference between a church with an altar and an altar with a church? A church with an altar is a building like this one where we gather for services and we do things even in Jesus' name. But often when we gather, all of the attention is on certain personalities. It's the lead pastor, it's the band, it's the media, it's the choir, the guest speaker. And I can speak for preachers like me. We like that when things are going exceptionally well. I know there are other ministers in the room. Tell me if I'm lying. I think this is true. You like it when things are going exceptionally well, but it brings with it an immense amount of pressure for you to produce, perform, provoke, surprise, overwhelm, persuade people. And the trouble with this is not that it wears you down, though it does. The trouble is that it detracts from the presence of one who is unseen, and yet whose glory, Isaiah says, fills the temple. We say in the evangelical church that everything rises or falls on leadership. This is because leadership is all we have. If there is no presence, when a church has an altar, people can pray. But when an altar has a church, people gather in front of it and they intercede for their cities and for their villages, for their families. They get in between God and the people, and they make deals that the city knows nothing about, but things become possible for those children that weren't possible before. Somebody got in that space and made that deal. In churches with altars, people make promises, but when an altar has a church, God makes promises and we make vows. In churches with an altar, people pray the sinner's prayer and they are forgiven. They are righteous. Isn't that what they say? Righteous in God's sight. But when an altar has a church and the cross is behind it, these people are not just declared righteous, church. They are fundamentally transformed. They become different people, as though there were a power in the room making them different. You're quiet, and when you're quiet, I feel alone. All right. Here's my appeal. What if there was a place in your life, in your home or your office, that you set up as a place to meet God? And what if that place was an extension of this one? I talked to a college student a week ago. She said, I don't know how to talk to God. My dad is a polytheist, Steve. He worships many gods. He has shrines all over the house. I said, what do you do? She says, I have a little rug in my room, and that's where I go. I get on my knees on my little rug, and there I have conversations with Almighty God. Is that enough? That's perfect. What if there was a place like that in your life? Now, I know for some of you, you're thinking, well, yeah, I don't want to be Catholic. I grew up in the Wesleyan Church. Trust me, you are so far from being Catholic. You don't have to worry about this. It is true. If you create such a place, the time may come when you will invest that altar with powers it does not have. It is not magic. It is rather symbolic of the presence that is behind it. But so that you have some place to go, something to look at, we put it front and center and lift it off the floor. And I'm only wondering how beautiful it would be if you had that place in your life. In the weeks that follow, we'll spend each week looking at one of the things you do there. And each of these you can do back home. Would that be good? Mm-hmm. This morning, the place for us to end is by approaching the altar with a sense of awe. A church with an altar has a lot of emotion, but there is a profound lack of awe. When an altar has a church, there is awe. And so that you might come forward today in a sense of awe, approaching the God who has come to you, made outrageous promises that only he could fulfill. My prayer is that you will come with gratitude.